Before 1945, the world of war was very different than what it is today. The primary tactic of war was to carpet bomb a country's troops, encampments, bunkers, and cities to soften them up for an impending ground attack. That all changed on July 16, 1945. The atomic bomb is one of the most powerful weapons in the world today because of its explosive ability, equivalent to about 20,000 tons of TNT at its creation, and far more than that today. The explosion produced gives off a blinding flash, searing heat wave, and a mushroom cloud that is as high as 40,000 feet, so powerful it fuses the sand beneath it into glass. This invention, however, did not happen overnight. It took many scientists from different places to come up with different pieces that fit together in the final product of Robert Oppenheimer, who came to be known as the father of the atomic bomb, and the American scientists at the Manhattan Project and Uranium Committee to make the first functioning atomic bomb. In 1938, Otto Hahn and Fritz Strassmann at the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute in Berlin, Germany, discovered that by bombarding atoms of uranium with neutrons, they could split the atoms in a process called fission. This splitting of the atoms releases a tremendous amount of energy. This worried many Americans and American scientists so much that after Albert Einstein heard about these experiments involving nuclear fission and its possible use in making a weapon, wrote a letter to President Roosevelt suggesting that scientists and the government work closely together in exploring the possibilities of building an atomic bomb. Within a few weeks of getting Albert Einstein's letter, President Roosevelt formed the Uranium Committee and a little bit later the Manhattan Project, directed by General Leslie Groves in 1942. Before they were to build an atomic bomb, they would have to find a way to make a theorized chain reaction of uranium atoms splitting in order to get the amount of energy and explosive potential that they needed. This experiment was done by Enrico Fermi and Leona Woods, among others, on a squash ball court under the football field of the University of Chicago. After them proving that their chain reaction theory was true, they started working on a mechanism to start the chain reaction at a much faster rate, but still be able to be carried by a plane at the Los Alamos Laboratory in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Robert Serber explained to everyone at Los Alamos the physics Robert Oppenheimer and his group discovered and his team's theoretically simple method of doing this. He said that they could put two pieces of very pure uranium into an adapted artillery gun where, inside the barrel, they could fire one of the pieces of uranium at the other. This would form something called a critical mass, the amount of material needed for a chain reaction to start and to get going. The reaction would begin splitting uranium atoms, releasing energy and sending more neutrons flying. Each fission only releases enough energy to move a grain of sand, but after less than a millionth of a second, so many atoms would have gone through fission that the uranium would blow apart with the force of millions upon millions of pounds of regular explosives. Serber also suggested surrounding the uranium with a tamper of very dense metal to prevent flying neutrons from escaping and instead bouncing back into the clump of uranium, causing more fission to occur. This, in turn, would cause a bigger explosion. They then frantically went to work creating two types of bombs, a uranium bomb named the Little Boy, named in honor of President Roosevelt, and a plutonium bomb named the Fat Man, in honor of the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Winston Churchill. They realized, however, that a different system would have to be used for the plutonium bomb because the gun assembly method used for the uranium bomb wouldn't be able to bring together the plutonium fast enough to avoid a premature detonation. A former student of Oppenheimer, physicist Seth Nettermeyer, suggested surrounding the plutonium with explosives in order to compress the plutonium instantly into a supercritical mass after detonating. They had to test this method before implementing it. This meant testing the most potentially destructive thing ever known somewhere on American soil, so Oppenheimer started searching for a usable test site in May of 1994. An area called Jornada de Muerto, meaning Journey of Death, a very fitting name, was chosen because of its flat land, good weather, and proximity to Los Alamos. The new president, Harry Truman, wanted a successful test by July 16, 1945, to use as a bargaining chip in his upcoming meeting with Churchill and Stalin for a position of great strength. Groves set the date for the Trinity test, the plutonium bomb test, to be July 16th. They raised the bomb, or the gadget, as they called it, up into the 100-foot-tall tower at the Trinity test site for final assembly. They had a quick panic. Due to the hot temperature, the plutonium expanded and wouldn't click into place. However, a few minutes later, the plutonium cooled and clicked into place. There were many observers that arrived on July 15th and watched from 20 miles away from Ground Zero, which was assumed to be a safe distance. There were other sheltered bunkers closer with concrete roofs only 5.7 miles away, equipped with scientific and photographic equipment. There was tight security surrounding the site due to Groves' paranoia of infiltration. After weather troubles, the time of the test was pushed back to 5:30 a.m. There was extreme tension, and after the countdown timer hit zero, nothing happened at first. But then, the world was ignited by a flash as bright as the sun, so bright it was seen in 3 states. The windows 125 miles away were broken, and the sound was deafening. The blast created a multicolored mushroom cloud that thrust 38,000 feet into the air over about 7 minutes. A crater was left by the blast that measured half a mile across, with the heat at the center of the blast reported to be approximately the center of the sun. The blast fused the sand into a greenish-gray glass called trinitite. This successful test measured that the bomb's yield was exactly 18,600 tons of conventional explosives. The test gave Truman a boost in confidence, but not as much of an advantage, as after telling Stalin, he had no reaction or interest. Truman and Churchill were delighted and thought this was because he didn't realize what Truman had said. However, this was actually because he already knew about it due to Soviet spies monitoring the project for a long time. The successful test of the bomb concluded the Manhattan Project due to its intent being accomplished, creating a weapon of mass destruction in order to win the waning war against America's last foe in the war, Japan. The atomic bomb has changed over time due to a few important things. They have changed due to the American arms race with the USSR during the Cold War from the 1950s to the 1980s. The advances led to smaller yield tactical warheads and larger yield strategic warheads. Delivery methods for these warheads also improved, with warheads now being able to be delivered by bombers, sea, land, and submarine-based missiles, artillery projectiles, landmines, cruise missiles, torpedoes, and air-to-air, air-to-ground, and earth-penetrating missiles carried by aircraft. In the 1950s, the atomic bomb took another huge leap with the development and creation of fusion-based hydrogen bombs, which fission bombs as their triggers. The atomic bomb has impacted our world in a tremendous number of ways. The science behind it has actually impacted our world in a positive way by providing us with an efficient way to power our world. However, it has created many far worse effects and impacts on our world. It has obliterated 2 Japanese cities, Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and taken lives away from hundreds of thousands of innocent people. The atomic bomb has also made it to where people live in constant paranoia of complete and utter obliteration at an instant due to national quarrels that the common man has practically no control over. It has made it to where a country isn't seen as a world power if it doesn't have a weapon capable of taking life away at an instant. The atomic bomb has made it to where nations like the United States and Russia have enough atomic bombs to exterminate mankind 3 or 4 to potentially 10 times over. Advances in technology, such as the development of the ICBM, have impacted our world by presenting the deterrence tactic of mutually assured destruction, defined as, quote, the idea that one's population could be best protected by leaving it vulnerable so long as the other side faced comparable vulnerabilities. In short, whoever shoots first dies second. End quote. Or in my simpler terms, if you nuke and obliterate us, we will nuke and obliterate you, so no one nuke each other. This puts everyone on edge due to the constant threat of nuclear war. A full-scale nuclear war would most likely be the end of humanity, sending the world into a global fallout, killing what's left of humanity due to radiation and a contaminated water supply. This all raises the very important and most likely eternal question of, if a country raims atomic bombs on mine, is it morally right to fire back and exterminate your attacker and potentially all of mankind? Or is it better to just accept your fate of obliteration and not fire back, ensuring the survival of the human race? The invention of the atomic bomb is a magnificent scientific feat that has brought about the many changes to our world, some good and some bad. All we can hope for is that in our lifetime, no one has a need or desire to use this tremendously powerful weapon ever again, preserving mankind and its existence on Earth. Albert Einstein realized the truly destructive thing he had kick-started the development of, and ended up regretting writing that letter that persuaded President Roosevelt to start the project. Oppenheimer, realizing what he had created, was reminded by the successful Trinity test of a line from a sacred Hindu text that has been used to this day to describe the creation of the atomic bomb and its destructive potential to humanity and all life as we know it on Earth. It is, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.